Welcome, 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 everyone. This is a Life on Purpose Live. I'm your host, Peter, and we're here on the Holistic Learning channel with Lena Vasquez. Um, Today is a wonderful day. I'm telling you, I can't wait for you guys to meet our next guest on the show. We're really going to be talking about stories. Have you ever considered the power of stories? Throughout our childhood, we've been told stories about our past, who we could potentially be, and what the future will look like. But what about the stories that we tell ourselves? These stories are really significant. The stories that we pass to our children are even more significant to me. These stories have a way of transporting us to another dimension of reality. They have the power to shape how we think about ourselves, our connection to the cosmos, and even our self-worth is dependent on these stories. And depending on who's telling you the story, they can control that narrative. A master storyteller, Daniel Levin, is going to be on our show. He's the author of the book, The Mosaic. And if you've ever suffered loss or felt disconnected, this book is going to really be able to help you to reshape that narrative. So we're going to bring in Daniel, we're going to bring in the master storyteller. We're going to get started about the importance of stories and how to shape the narrative of your life. Daniel.
Hey, Peter, how are you?
Really, really good, man. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time today.
It's my absolute honor. Absolute honor. I'm looking forward
And
to
like I
it.
said before, you look very handsome. You got the wise beard. Is there like wisdom in the beard that comes with it?
I think the beard tries to make up for the lack of wisdom that's actually there. I'm hoping people will feel like I'm Santa Claus and bypass the wisdom part.
Right. Very early Christmas for
Oh,
me
oh,
anyway.
oh.
That's how I feel about it. Right. So, like I was saying to you before we started the show, when we had our initial conversation, it felt so comfortable talking to you. And I had heard you speak many times before on Clubhouse and had a really special appreciation for you. But what you might not know is actually my partner, Lena, when went on the platform Clubhouse, you were the first person she heard speak on the platform.
Wow.
And she had told me about you before, and that was before I heard you speak. And I was like, I never heard of this guy before. And so you had like a little fan club in my family.
Well,
Um,
thank you, Lena.
right, way before we even spoke. And so then I had a conversation with Richard Rudd, who you know very well.
Yes.
And in our initial conversation, that was like maybe March of last year when I talked to him. And we were talking about the power of listening. And he asked me, "Have you ever heard of this guy, Daniel Levin?" And I
Wow.
was like, "Yeah, I've heard of him before," because I had only heard you speak a few times. And he's
Yeah.
like, "If you ever want to learn how to listen, you need to go and listen to Daniel." And I
Wow.
thought that was so powerful, how that whole came full circle. So I wanted to talk about that even before we get into the power of stories, the story we tell ourselves, the stories that we hear. Can you talk just a little bit about, that what you bring into the room, like, the power of listening, how to listen, and how you influenced Richard Rudd so much that he told me about that before I even met you.
First of all, he is a exemplary human being. And so I think a fly landing on his shoulder would influence him. So I want to take the credit from me and put it back to him because he's such a beautiful man that he would see goodness in just about anybody. I'm very touched that he would say something like that. I'm very touched also that Lena um, came into the room and that we were the first room she came into, and she stayed on Clubhouse. And, a lot of people I said, okay, this is not for me. Um, I've gotten older now. I'm not the young buck that I was. I'm still in my mind the young buck that I was. But I used to be trained to go into corporations and find what was wrong with them and immediately be able to fix them. My teacher taught me to go into a room that most people would think was perfect and in 30 seconds to find 10 things that were wrong with that room. And I said, why do you want to teach me that? And he said, well, you're going to work with big companies, and they're going to want to know that you're able to see the problem, you're able to know what it is, and you're able to fix it. And I said, okay, what he didn't tell me is a beautiful saying that they have in Zen, which is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So not only did he teach me how to find problems with corporations, what he also taught me was how to find problems in relationships, how to find problems with people, how to find problems with life. So everything happened that I would walk into a place and I would immediately find 10 things wrong with it, which wasn't the way I wanted to live. Not at all. It's the opposite of the way I wanted to live. So I did an experiment, and I decided that I wanted to talk to as many people as I possibly could to find not what was wrong with them, but what they felt was the connecting point of what made somebody right, what made them comfortable. I'm going to say 1 million people I talked to. I probably didn't, but it was close enough that I can throw that number around. And what I found surprised me. In almost every single case, people said one, or if not all, of these 3 things. They said they wanted to be loved and accepted, they wanted to be listened to and heard, and they wanted to be seen and acknowledged. And I was taken by that, because those aren't hard things to do. To make people feel comfortable, it's not hard to love them and accept them. It's not hard to listen to them and hear them. And it's not hard to see them and acknowledge them. It's much harder to do the opposite. So I dedicated my life to learning how to do those 3 things. Peter, what I didn't expect was what would come as a result of that. Because when people felt loved and accepted, listened to and heard, and seen and acknowledged, they had no reason to have walls around them, and so they dropped their walls. When they dropped their walls, I had no reason to have a wall up either. So suddenly we were experiencing what is commonly called intimacy. There was an intimacy in our relationship. What I never expected was that when those walls came down, all the blessings that were waiting for them outside those walls came pouring into them. And suddenly their business started to grow. I didn't do anything. I was just quiet. Their business started to grow. Their health started to get better. Their marriages became better. Their relationships became more. Their finances became better. And they came to me and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I said, for what? They said, well, after talking with you, everything changed. I said, make no mistake about it. I thank you for the honor that you're giving me, but make no mistake about it. You were the one that did that, not me. And so I devoted my life to just listening to people, to just loving people, and to seeing people. That's all I can tell you, brother.
Wow. This is exactly how it is when I come into spaces where you speak. Like there's a moment that just needs to be left there so the air can somehow be transformed by the things that you say. So the three elements that I'm hearing from you that are fundamental to being a good listener and to creating that space is to love people, to make them feel seen and heard.
Yeah, it's not even to make them feel like none of this is hard.
Okay.
It's so much easier to love and accept somebody than to hate and not respect them. I mean, when it comes down to it, I remember I was in a room talking to woman, and she was just brilliant and so beautiful. And I said to her, I want you to know, I just love you so much. And she said, you're so full of it, dude. What are you talking about? You don't even know me. How can you tell me you love me? And I said, okay, I understand. So it's okay for me to hate you for no reason, but it's not okay for me to love you for no reason. And she said, oh, let me think about that. I guess you can love me for no reason, because if you told me you hate me, I would understand that.
Wow.
That's how convoluted our world has become. It's easy to love somebody. It's easy to hear. It's much easier for me to listen to you than to go blah, 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 blah. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. I don't have to agree with what you say, but I can listen to what you say. And to see and acknowledge you is just like you're sitting right there. What am I going to do? Is pretend you're not there? I'm a very simple person. The easiest way to do something is to do it.
Right. I love how you brought the conversation there, because this is exactly where we're going with this, right? The power of stories, that narrative that's running in the undertone, especially that silent narrative. When people make silent promises, when things happen to you, and there's a story that starts to run in the background. Can you talk about why the story is so important, or why is it so important to pay attention to the stories we tell ourselves and how we tell that story?
So let me tell a story if I can do.
Of course.
Okay. They tell a story about a monastery and monks living in the monastery, and they were a tight group of guys. And one day, a new monk showed up. He went to the head monk, and the head monk said, yes, you're more than welcome here. Come and be with us. And the new monk came in, and his ways were different than the ways of the old monks. He did everything different. And the old monks didn't like it because he was like stirring up the pot, stirring up the kettle. And so one day the candelabra in the temple was missing. And they thought, where in the hell could the candelabra be? Who would have taken that? And they made up a story that this new monk stole the candelabra and put it around all the monks. You can't trust this guy. He came in, and within a few days, our candelabra is gone. And so the monks went huffing and puffing to his room and knocked on the door and said, we caught you. You've got the candelabra. He said, yes, of course I do. I saw that it hadn't been polished in a long time. And I just wanted to bring honor to the place where we sit and say our prayers. So I've brought it here, and I've been polishing it all morning. In 1 minute, the story changed. He went from a thief that had stolen the candelabra to now a humble monk who had decided that the candelabra would be much more dignified for the monastery if it were polished and taken care of. Same action. Monk took the candelabra. Different story. And there's stories like that all throughout time. The beautiful story of the man who was in the concentration camp. And he said, if you want to find what real salvation is, real love, real honor, real dignity, come with me and live in a concentration camp for 6 months. You'll be amazed at how beautiful it is. That man was Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Because he put what he was trying to say, and what I'm trying to say here perhaps, is things are neutral. They're not good or bad. They're not better or worse. But the meaning we give to it, the story we tell about it, changes the way we view it, changes the way others view it. And so story is so important because it sets the foundation for how a person, a business, a relationship, a company is going to be viewed. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just sitting here listening really to the concept of the stories that we tell and the stories that we hear. And a lot of times those stories have to do with a narrative that was given to us.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that we just want to run on this program or we just want to run on this story, but this is the story that we were given and we believed it to be true. And a lot of times that story is not taking us into a life of fulfillment.
Totally.
How would a person begin to navigate that path? You talked about it a little bit. I saw it on your website and in your book. I read that. I kind of picked out the narrative about changing anything in one of the different areas will change the story. But can you dive into that? If someone received a story about their life, about potentially being limiting, or whether or not they are deserving of love, or if they have suffered loss, can you talk about the story that is running there that is not necessarily self-made but was received, how they can start addressing that story?
What a fabulous question, and this is so important. And I hope I give my answer gives justice to the question, because this is where most of us get stuck, myself included. I remember when I was in the monastery, there was a head monk who watched over us and a head nun who also watched over us. And something about the head nun, she was upset with me for some reason. I don't know what I did. I must have done something that made her upset. But every time she would speak to me, she would put me down. And she would just say something that made me, probably I was an arrogant son of a gun, and I probably needed to be put down because I got caught up in my own, oh, aren't I great? I'm meditating 18 hours a day and how fabulous I am. And so she probably had reason to do it. But it didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel good for 1 second. And she was my superior. And after a few months, I went to her and I said, I really need to talk with you. She said, sure, what's up? I said, I take away your authority to control me. I know you're a superior of mine, but I no longer respect your authority to control me. I don't want you telling me what to do. I was shocked. She actually listened. From that moment on, we became the best of friends. She never told me what to do, but she got me to do more things than she would ever have gotten me to do by telling me what to do. What is it I really am trying to say? And I'm sort of fumphing along in the way I'm saying it. At the end of the day, Peter, you for your life, me for my life, the listener for their life, has the authority to determine what story they want to accept. Just because someone tells you a story doesn't mean that you have to accept it. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It may cause you troubles to disagree. It may make it harder. It may make it easier. That's not the question here. The question is, how do we remove ourselves from the handed down lineage of family tradition that has told me that I can't be more than I am? I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. I'm too young. I'm too old. None of those things are true. The only thing that is true is, what do I know I can do? And when I say I don't mean this ego, this big fat Santa Claus-like being. I mean, when I get myself out of the way and I allow this infinite energy of the one that's greater than I to come through me, there is nothing Exclamation point, nothing that one can't do. So my only job, makes it really easy, is to try and hold on to the shoelaces of the one greater than I. And allow that presence to take me wherever it desires. Simple.
Like I said, there's a space. I always feel like when you talk, I think we talked about this before you came on, that I don't know if I will have anything to say after you finish talking.
I'm just wondering if that's because I bored you to death or you're sleeping.
No, it's because it's something I feel like I knew already that you would leave me things to sit with, not something that I would just rush to implementation. It would be to sit in a state of meditativeness on some of the points that you brought forward. Because as you were talking, I was really receiving that concept of control versus letting go.
Yeah.
So the information came to you, or the story comes in, and a lot of times people go to grab and control the story, and I'm going to move it in this direction with force. And what you're saying is letting go and grabbing onto the shoelaces and letting the divinity that is within you take you along a different journey, and or the journey that is more fitting for you. I don't know. I could be completely wrong.
No, you're completely right, and it's beautiful what you're saying. And what really happens for me, and it ties your first question and your second question beautifully together. There's some people that think that I belong in a straitjacket because of what I'm going to say now. But I believe everything in the world is speaking to us. Everything is talking to us. And I learned this through writing the Mosaic. I sat down to write that book, and I wrote from that book from my heart. And it took me 3 years to write it, because I would write a chapter and then I would save it, and the next morning I would wake up and it wasn't there. For 3 years, it happened over and over and over again. Finally, I said to my wife, look, I know how to save chapters, but will you just do this for me? Because maybe I'm jinxed in something here. She started to save them. And then just as I finished the book, my computer crashed. The only thing that we couldn't save was the book that I had written. So 3 years I sat with that book to try and write what should have taken, what I thought was going to take 6 weeks to write. So I brought the characters that were make-pretend characters that I had made up in my mind's eye on a Zoom call, something like this. And I had them all sitting in front of me in my mind's eye. And I said to them, what the expletive deleted are you doing? Like, what the heck is going on here? Why won't you let me save this chapter? And they said to me, we don't like what you're saying for us to say. I said, okay, but like, with all due respect, you don't exist. I created you. You're a figment of my imagination. I should be able to put dialogue into your mouth because you don't even exist. And they said to me, Danny, that's not true. Once you created us, we do exist. And what you're saying is not what we would say. So I said, how do we resolve this? They said, we want you to just sit and listen to us tell you what we want to say and just write that. I said, okay, then what happens? Your book will be done in a month. I said, so after 3 years of trying to get this darn thing done, I don't care what you say it, I'll write it, and we'll be done with this damn thing. But what did that tell me? What did it show me? It showed me that if I were to go to my business and I would ask my business, what does it want to say to me? It would answer me if I would listen. Mm-hmm. If I would go to the environment and ask the environment, what does it want to say to me? It would talk to me. If I would go to my body and say, what does it want to say to me, and listen to it, it would tell me. And for me in particular, my body has been in a lot of pain because I ask it, it tells me, I don't listen, I don't follow. So it's not good enough to just ask and listen, then I have to follow. And in the places where I don't follow, I experience pain, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental. So the beauty of a story is it gives us something that's talking to us. Now we just have to listen. And we have to say, what is that story trying to say to me? Story, how can I best put out to the world what it is you want me to say? And let it tell me. Make sense?
100%. You said this in your book, right? When we're connected, right? We
Yes.
feel love, and then when we're disconnected, we suffer.
Yes.
It reminds me really of this, the Zen tradition comes from Buddhism. You mentioned that before. And this concept from Gautama, the Buddha, where he talks about where we suffer, right? What is the root cause of suffering? And because everyone wants to be happy because they want to stop suffering. And the fundamental things that I understood from that teaching were that if you want to know the root cause of your suffering, look at where you're gripping.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, right? So look at what are you not listening to? Are you not
Yes.
listening to your spouse? Are you not listening to your physical body? Are you not concentrating on something a little bit higher than yourself? And therein lies your suffering. So just going at it from a different dimension of what you were talking about, that's what connected a lot with me.
Yeah. For me, Buddha was very clear.
Mhm.
He said, all suffering comes from wanting things to be other than they are.
Mm.
All happiness comes from being content with where they are and doing what is in front of you. Doesn't mean you can't want to change things. Doesn't mean you can't ask to be a vehicle to bring greater happiness into the world. But when I look at my life, I look at the resistance that I show up in so many different ways, wanting things to be other than they are. Why? Like, they're just beautiful the way they are. Well, there's injustice. Of course there is. But like, accept where things are. Because until I never realized this before, but this is going to be beautiful for me, and I thank you for this. Because when I love and accept, listen to and hear, and see and acknowledge where things are, that brings contentment. That's what Buddha said. I never saw that. The three things that I said to start to show up. And this acceptance of what is means that I love and accept it, I see and acknowledge it, and I listen to it and hear it. Then we can go, once I get an idea of what it is, then I can say, okay, hey, let's see if we can move this another level. Are you ready to go with me somewhere? Let's see. Let's take it. Let's take it the next step. And if they say yes, then let's go. How cool is that?
I think that really resonates to something fundamental that I received from my own time in isolation. I didn't go to a monastery. I went to the military.
Yes.
So different. And I didn't have a nun yelling at me. I had a drill instructor. So, slight differences.
I don't know. This is not that drill sergeant.
We got to share some of those stories and see if we can find the similarities there. Maybe that's what connects us. The monastery and the military
I love
may
it.
have some significant connections there. What I'm really hearing, or what's resonating with me from that, is this concept that I started to understand after diving into Mahayana Buddhism and the Zen philosophy a little bit, about understanding this concept of the binary system of reality, which,
Yeah.
the ones and zeros, the binary systems that we use even to make this video possible, and all our technological advances came from the Chinese. Their binary system that they discovered actually through meditativeness and observing nature, which is, I mean, I just going into that just a little bit like blows my mind into that
Yeah.
connection there, and we're straying so far away from it now, which makes everything possible. But the understanding that I got from that is that the only way I can recognize something beautiful is because I have a concept of ugly. The only reason I can understand and in my personal life try to have peace and harmony is because I know what war feels like.
Yes.
And so it's also an understanding that I need to have a deep appreciation for the darkness in order to step into the light.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and how a person navigates that? Because I do find that difficult at times
Yes.
to embrace the ugly in in a sense of also wanting to embrace the beautiful.
Yes. So what if there weren't ugly and beautiful? What if they were just the same thing? Because
Right.
even just the way you explained it, that if I can't see beauty unless I can see ugly, then ugly is a part of beauty. And it takes ugly and beauty has to coexist so that I can understand each other. And so I can't say that I do this all the time. For God's sake, I don't want to come across as something other than I am. I'm just like a little bozo on the bus trying to make my way through. But the hit that I got while you were speaking was how beautiful that was. That really touched me because I really saw how interconnected evil and good are, good and bad, light and dark. And again, remember, the story we tell creates the reality we believe in. And so if I believe that there's this thing over here called evil, and all it's trying to do is make my goodness disappear. It's trying to beat me. It's trying to take it away. It's trying to supplant it with bad things. I'm going to believe that story. Why won't I? When I look out in the world, I see it everywhere around me. But when I have the opportunity to say, what if what I see is not what is? What if there's something behind what I see that actually is? And I just told this story in our room on Clubhouse this morning. I had the grace to be able to sit for a while with a homeless man. And it was such a beautiful moment. I'll never forget it. It was like almost 20 years ago. I felt so much in those days on the street as I was walking past people. I felt the pain in the heart of somebody, and it literally brought me to the ground. I felt that person passed and it was gone. And I felt the pain in my leg, and I saw someone was walking with a cane, and I couldn't bear the pain that was in my leg. That person passed, and I could stand. Someone else passed and had a mental illness, and I couldn't bear the fact that my mind was so confused and cluttered. And finally, I just looked for solace, and the only place that I could find solace was where the pavement met the wall of the building. And sitting at the corner where the pavement met the wall was a homeless man. And I walked up and I just said, I just need to sit here with you a minute, brother. And he said, no, you can't sit here. This is my corner. I need to make money from this corner. I said, how much are you going to make in the next 30 minutes? He said, I make $10 an hour, $5 for the next 10 minutes. So I looked into my wallet and I gave him $50. I said, hopefully this will cover your next half an hour. He said, you're crazy. I told you $5, not $50. I said, that's okay. For as bad as the situation is that you think you have, I find comfort in you. And I want to give you something for that comfort that I receive from you. And he said, you're strange, man. I said, I know. But tell me what that comfort is that I feel in you. He said, I'm a homeless man. Most people don't get any comfort from me. But I have to tell you, in the early parts of my life and being homeless, I was so torn by it because I wanted to be like all the people that passed me by all day. They were important. They were going to their workplace. They were going hither and yon. They were doing things in the world that were significant. But over time, the more I sat here, the more I realized those people pass me 2, 3, 4, sometimes 10 times a day, going to where they're going back from where they're going to where they're going back to where they're going. They don't even notice me, but I notice them. There's a peace I have from just being able to stay in this one place and not go anywhere else. And I know people yell at me. I know people throw things at me. I know people, steal my money. But there's a peace I have in just knowing this is where I sit. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I just sit here. And I started to feel so sad for the restlessness of people that were passing me by, going hither and yon, going this way, going that way. And I started to sit here and I thought, God, I could sit here and I could pray for these people. They don't talk to me anyway. I don't have to be alert. I don't have to ask for money. I have a sign here that says, if you care to give me something, give me something. So I can just be here quiet. And I started to pray for the people that were passing by. And it didn't happen all at once. But all of a sudden, the people that would never say hello to me started to sit with me and say, what do I feel from you? Very similar to what just happened with you. And I said, so that's amazing. So you're like this little saint sitting on the street corner. He said, don't get carried away. But for me, he was. When we see, and that for me is the beauty of the Mosaic, the book that was written after they took it away from me to write. What it showed me is that what I see is not what is. It really isn't. It's just what I see. Sometimes what I see is what is, but most of the time it's not. And if I would have the courage to slide what I believe one way or the other, slide what I see one way or the other, what I might see is what's behind what I see. And once I see that, if I have courage, I'll slide it again. Until there's no difference between what I see and when I slide it away, what I see.
I don't know how this is being received, but I know that even in the back here, the air is just a little bit different as you're telling that story with the homeless man. I do want to dive into your book a bit. I think that's important.
Thank you.
Because if I had my own way, we would just be talking like this the whole time.
Fine with that also. Don't worry.
I have very few things written down on a little piece of paper here in front of me, and I haven't looked at it once. This is just really moving how it needs to move, and I definitely feel a sense of flow in the conversation, moving about the connection between stories, its importance, and how to navigate that story, whether it be one you made up yourself or what you've received. I think it's important to get into some definitions. And I'm saying that because when I initially, came across your work, I was like, well, Mosaic, what is that?
Right.
So, and I did a little bit of research myself just because I'm just this type of curious person. I'll do a deep dive. So Lena had to deal with me explaining the difference, the different type of mosaics for the past couple of weeks. That's all I was reading and looking at. And it just so happens that I had just read a book about Zen. Um, and then I went into reading the Mosaic. And I did find some interesting definitions of Mosaic and somehow connection to, I didn't know this before, but what the word Mosaic can also connect to the Mosaic laws or being of Moses, the connection to works attributed to Moses. Please talk to us about that because it took me quite a while to research that. You didn't tell me, which is good.
I, and I don't know that I could tell you much because that's not. I only found out about it as you found out about it by accident. Because as I started to feel it, I literally, I used to think that I was really a smart person. I don't think that anymore. I think that the whole world is concerned with mindfulness. I'm more concerned with mindlessness. I would really like to get to the place in my life where I let my mind rest. That instead of my mind being full, my mind is less. Because in the experience of not allowing my mind to guide my steps, what I found is my heart and spirit guide my steps. And intuitively, I'm able to feel things that I was never able to feel when I was counting on my mind figuring it out. Again, I don't know if this is coming across or making sense. But what I like about a mosaic, and this is just my own intuitive feel of it, it's coming to me to invite me to bring a new paradigm into the world. Right now, the paradigm is teacher-student, fixer-fixie, someone who needs help, someone who helps. It's a very vertical relationship. Boss, employee. When I look at the beauty and simplicity of a mosaic, there's no verticality. The pieces on the top of the mosaic don't tell the pieces on the bottom what to do. All the pieces do is they hold each other. And then I started to think, gosh, isn't that interesting? Because isn't that what happens when I love and accept a person? When I listen to them and hear them, and when I see and acknowledge them, don't they just feel held? Don't they just feel as if it's safe, nothing can get to them? And I thought, darn, this little mosaic is sort of infiltrating into every part of my being. And then it told me something that really surprised me. It said, when the pieces around me are no longer functioning for me, it's not like a jigsaw puzzle, where a jigsaw puzzle, you have to put every piece in place in order for the picture to look right. But with a mosaic, you can put any piece anywhere. So if the pieces that surround me are starting to suffocate me rather than give me access into new areas, I can just break it. It's made up of broken pieces anyway. And if they're not broken, some of the pieces in the mosaic are. So I can break that pattern that surrounds me and just take my piece and move it someplace else. I also love that peace, P-I-E-C-E, and peace, P-E-A-C-E, are the same words, have the same sound. So when my peace, P-I-E-C-E, has peace, P-E-A-C-E, and I put that peace someplace else, I bring peace to another part of the mosaic.
Well, I need to have a camera back here so you can see my face and our technician's face back here. As you're talking, we're looking at each other like,
This has nothing to do with Mosaic law. Where did this idiot come from?
this is so good. Oh man, so much beauty there that you were talking about, and you mentioned it in your book, right? What you say, it's our brokenness that makes us beautiful.
Yes.
It's our brokenness that makes us beautiful. I never forget when I read that. I read it, and I just stopped. I stopped reading it, and I was like, this is something that hits home, because oftentimes, even in my own life, I've seen that where, I've had these experiences either through going to the military, having issues with my own psychology, suffering in my own life, and these things that apparently are breaking me into different pieces, took me into a place of darkness at first. And I didn't really understand that there was a way out of it. So I really avoided people. I avoided the connection that you talked about in your book a lot. But I also found that it also made me exceedingly limited, because I was just broken by myself. But then I started to find that as I shared aspects of my brokenness with people, they felt seen, loved, and heard,
Yes.
because we all seem to share that same connection of brokenness into these pieces that we need to find a way of putting it together. How do we navigate that concept of creating that connection? If you can bring the book into it a little bit, so people can have a little bit, because I'm not doing a great job of referencing the
Oh
book.
no, you're doing a great job. I'm not doing a great job. I really, I appreciate you wanting to promote the book. The book is really important, but it's really not important at all.
Mhm.
Really, when I have an opportunity to be with people, I could care less whether they buy the book or not. We have such small periods of time, such small moments where we have an opportunity to be present and just bring our presence and see if our presence can have an impact and people can feel us. And so really what's most important to me is not that I wrote a book, not that I worked with corporations, not anything that I've done. The only thing important to me right now is, are any of your listeners feeling something unique? Do they feel a presence in this conversation that you and I are having that allows them to feel safe to take some risks? Because when we hold space, like the mosaic, a mosaic holds space for the pieces to come and be there, no matter what they look like, no matter how big they are, no matter if they're broken or whole, no matter what color they are, no matter what region of the world they're from. It holds the space for them to set themselves in that space and create something beautiful. For me, that happened as I went on the journey to try and find heaven. The book's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults, he's just a little boy. When he asks the adults where my parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So as a young boy, he decides nothing else in the world is important to him. He's going to set out in search of that place called heaven. He's going to set out in search of that place where there's unconditional love, that he wants to feel his mom and his dad again. And he sets off. He's a kid. He knows nothing. And the people he meets are not the clergymen and the swamis and the gurus and the shamans and the priests and the Aborigines elders. The people he meets are common, ordinary people. They're the road worker. They're the homeless guy. They're the street artist and the waitress and the gardener and the juice maker. Simple, simple people. So simple that he as a boy says, what am I meeting these people? They're not going to show me anything. And he hears a voice say to him inside, just sit with them and listen to their stories. Don't think so much. Peter, in 100% of the cases when he did that and he sat with people and listened, the person he walked away from was definitely not the person he walked up to. He saw a completely different human being there when he left, when he listened to them and heard their life. And so what was the Mosaic really saying? It's an invitation to realize that nothing is as it seems. And if you just take those, nothing is as it seems. If you take those 5 words and just sit with them. I purposely didn't make it a religious book. I purposely didn't bring in spiritual characters. Because what I wanted people to see is the ordinariness of our life is what is spiritual. Somewhere along the line, ordinary has gotten a bad rap. If you ask people, do you want your children to grow up and be ordinary? Almost 100% of the time, 100% of the people would say absolutely not. And I said to them, what do you want them to be? And they said, we want them to be extraordinary. I said, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe it's just a crease in the English language. But if you don't want your children to be ordinary, why in the world would you want to be them to be extra of something they don't want to be? Why would you want to be extraordinary? And what Mosaic showed me is extraordinary things happen when extraordinaries come together. On our own, we can do very little. Together, we can do everything. And so the Mosaic is really a cry, a call, an invitation to get away from all the things that separate us. Color of skin, religion, how much money we make, what border we live behind, what your daddy does, what my mommy does, what kind of car I drive, what kind of horse I have. And to come back to what would happen if our distinctiveness is what gives us value. When we're all the same, we have no value. When we're all different, our perspective is what gives the entirety of the world value. The Mosaic, in the simplest possible way, without philosophy, without teaching, just telling stories. If it's successful, and successful means what? That it touches one person. Then I go away a happy man. And it already's done that because it touched me. I hope this makes some sense.
It reminds me of this entire thing you were saying. It takes me back to a Zen story, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Zen koans. like a koan is not really a commandment. It's a, just to give a background fulfillment for the people who are listening. It's not like a commandment. A commandment, a koan is given to a person who asks questions about their spirituality, not with the expectation that the koan will be followed, but that by asking the question and receiving the koan, it will tell you something about yourself.
Yes.
And I really felt that way about the characters in your book. It wasn't like a philosophy that I needed to follow. It was something for me to look at within myself.
Yeah.
That's how I really felt about these stories. And there's a Zen story about a monk who wanted to find enlightenment, kind of like yourself when you went off to the monastery. I don't know if that's what I was doing when I went to the military, but to some extent, trying to find myself. And the monk went to, a Zen master and asked the question, what is the way to enlightenment? And just as Zen masters do, like yourself, had a long beard, right? Said, said to the monk, your ordinary life, just like you said, is the way to enlightenment. And he said, my ordinary life, tell me about it so I can write it down. And the only thing that the Zen master said to him is, when you try to write it down, you deviate. When you try to capture it, you deviate. When you try to control it, you deviate. When you try to explain it, you deviate. It just is.
Yes. I love
So I really appreciate you bringing that into the space about how the mosaic can be a really good catalyst for finding truth in our lives.
I have no idea what it will do for anybody else. I mean, I've read reviews that people have been kind enough to write, and they're kind reviews. So I appreciate every one of those. I read every single one. It hasn't gotten any bad reviews, but that doesn't mean there aren't people that don't like it. They probably just haven't written a review. But I wish that people would write. I wish I could read the reviews of people that didn't like it. Because part of what happens is there's so much beauty in being able to see things from every perspective. I was speaking to someone who we were talking about making it into a movie. And he said, Danny, I absolutely love your book. It's a fun book. It's a good book. The problem with it for a movie is there's not enough bad things that happen to him in it. It's all good characters doing good things and nice things happen. And he said, do you have your adversity? I see that you do that. And I said, it's so interesting that you say that because it's true, first of all. Because I've had so much adversity in my life that as I wrote the book from the perspective of how could I take the things that seem like they were really bad things that happened to me and see goodness in them. So I only wrote it for me from the perspective of how can I see goodness in the pain that I've experienced. But as a movie, that wouldn't make any sense because the whole landscape of a movie is you have adversity and you have your character, your hero in it who is overcoming adversity and you think he's overcome it and now it goes into another pothole and then another pothole and then another, and it's the whole situation is how do I overcome everything that keeps coming to me? That's the backdrop of my life. The Mosaic was my medicine. To see how what I thought was not good was actually gave me beautiful opportunities to meet certain situations. And it's just ordinary. It's just an ordinary, simple story. You can read it in 2 hours.
It didn't take me 2 hours. It took me because I kept having to sit with it, and I really appreciated how the book did that. How it took me through these different stories, but it was more stories that could relate to different aspects of my life, like these different characters that came into play, whether that be the beast or the wise one, the flower girl. I really like that. That was my my favorite part, the love story, how you kind of described that was beautiful. And I really thought to some extent that it elicited things within me that I had never thought about before. For some reason, I started to get attached to these different character stories,
I love
and
that.
one of them um, was moving through the concept of understanding the different parts of a story, which I'm so glad I remember to say this now. That every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you have to be able to realize what part of the story you're in, but
Yes.
also what was important for Mo, which is the character of the story, right? Is not to try to skip a step, not to try to jump like you're talking about, whether that be in your business, your personal life, relationship. You're in the beginning, but you're trying to jump to the end, or you're in the middle and you're trying to bypass something. Can you talk about how to navigate that understanding of beginning, middle, and end of the story, and how can we navigate that in different scenarios that play out in our lives?
Yeah, because I suck at it. I mean, I used I was always really good at beginnings. I was the person people called when there was hesitation, and I just like I found doors in the middle of walls that didn't exist in other people's minds. I could begin something. I love that beginning energy. I also, as a kid, was able to figure out complicated math problems, but I had no idea how the formulas were that I worked. I just knew what the answers were. So much so that in fourth grade, we were given a test and the 20 complicated math problems. And within 10 minutes, I handed in my paper. And the teacher said, "Are you giving up? Don't give up, Danny. It's, you still have another 40 minutes, 60 minutes is the test." I said, "No, I'm not giving up. I'm done." And she looked at it and she couldn't believe it. She said, "Class, stay put here, finish your class. Danny and I are going to the office." And she took me to the office and she took me to the principal's office. And she said, she talked to the principal, and the principal then called me in. And I thought, I wonder what's going on. And he called me and he said, "Danny, we've called your mom. You're getting expelled from school today." I said, "What are you talking about? What did I do?" He said, "You handed in this paper. There's no formulas. There's no work done on how you came up with the answers. You must have had the answers somewhere and you're just cheating. And we have a zero tolerance policy for cheating." I said, I'm sorry. I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't cheat. I was brought up in a very innocent family. You can even hear as I'm talking about it now. It wasn't like I fought him. I just said, I can understand maybe why you think that, but I just know the answers. I don't know how to get to the answers. I just know the answers. And he said, "That's a beautiful story, but it just is not true." I said, "Do me a favor. Our teacher's right here. We have to wait anyway. I have to go to, I can't go anywhere until my mom comes and she's going to be another 10 or 15 minutes. Why don't you have her give me 3 more questions and just lock me up somewhere?" They gave me 3 more questions. In 5 minutes, I knocked on the door and I said, "Okay, I'm done." And the teacher looked at it and she said, "These are the right answers. He doesn't have any work here." I said, "Well, I certainly didn't know what questions you were going to ask me. I certainly didn't have anybody to talk to me. You locked me up in a room." The principal had me do testing, and he found out that in fourth grade I was doing college level and above math, and that somehow my mind just worked differently than other people's minds. So I always had an end in sight. I was always good at starting. I was always good at ending. And I thought, I already see where the end is going. Why would I waste time in the middle? Just let's get it. If I know where I'm going, let's just go there. What I didn't realize is the middle is where life happens. It's where we fall in love. It's where we fall down and hurt ourselves. It's where we get up. It's where we make friendships. It's where we're betrayed. It's where we are held. It's where we learn how to be human beings. Life isn't just beginning and ends. But I spent the whole early part of my life breaking open doors to get in and finding solutions to get out with no respect for the middle. The middle is where life is for me now. Enjoying every pregnant pause, enjoying every moment that the middle gives us. And when I ask people, do you have any idea? Can you tell me what the 3 things are that everything in the world has to go through? And depending on what they're like, they'll give me a metaphysical answer. You got to love God. You got to do this. You got to get. I said, no, it's really simple. You're complicating. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. And they would say, what is it? And I said, everything has to go through a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's nothing you can't get. You can't do that. And when it ends, you got to begin again. So I think I've lived a very peculiar life. And because it's been peculiar, some people find it interesting to read about, and thank God that wasn't their life. Or, look up to it and say, that's fun that you can make something good out of something that's happened like that. But I would encourage everybody who's listening not to think about what my life is, but to think about your life. What is it that you see that other people don't see? And never back down from that. Because it might just be that what you see will help us solve huge problems in humanity, because nobody else sees it. Brother, thank you for the honor of sitting with you. I don't know if I want to be sensitive. You told me we're going to half an hour. I'm already.
No. Well, I told you at the beginning, I make sure that my time is clear, but I want to also respect your time. But no, the pleasure is all mine. To recap it, I guess in a Zen story, since we're talking about stories, a merchant was out contributing to different monasteries in Japan. And he came upon a monastery that was overfilled with students, but they just didn't have the capacity. And so he gave, the wise one who was there, he gave him some gold to help rebuild the monastery and make it facilitating for everyone there. And then the wise one took the gold and said, okay, I'll take it. And he started to walk away. And then the merchant said something to him like, are you not going to say thank you? And he said, why should I say thank you? It is the giver who should be grateful. It is the giver who should be grateful. I'll never forget that, reading that and trying to understand why a person who is giving should be the one that is grateful. And then I started to understand that we are actually hardwired for giving. We are hardwired for when we give, even our chemical structure in our body responds to it, right? You get serotonin and dopamine as a result. So at any opportunity that we have to give, we should do so and also be grateful for the opportunity to give. And it really changed my narrative about giving and what gratitude is about. And after recently having a child, I can see that.
Yes.
When I have an opportunity to, at the work,
I lost you.
Okay, yeah, we lost connection for a little bit. I still feel a sense of gratitude just for being able to do things for my child. So I would say, if anything I was able to provide here, I'm eternally grateful to have the opportunity to have you on and to be able to give something.
Thank you so much. And, I just want to add a small, tiny point to that. Because so many of us are so good at giving.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us suck at receiving. And if we suck at receiving, the giver can never give. And so part of the beauty of being the giver. Part of the reason why I say thank you to someone for letting me give is because they've received it. And when they receive it, or when I receive it, it allows for that flow of that circle of energy to keep building momentum and strength, giving and receiving, giving and receiving. So many people say, no, I'll just give to you. I don't need to receive anything. We're not vulnerable enough to receive. But I want to thank you for being open and receiving, and for allowing me to receive you as well.
Wow, this is so great. As I said before, when we were talking, I said, okay, we're going to bring you on, and then we're going to end, and it's going to be great. And this is exactly.
Thank you so much, brother.
It was amazing having you on. If you can hang out for a little bit, Daniel, we'll talk a little bit after. But thank you so much. I receive you, and I receive your blessings. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us.
Mirror.
Wow. So that was Daniel Levin talking about the Mosaic, the power of stories. And I hope you got something from this conversation today. If you like this episode, please go ahead and click the like button, follow Lena's channel, and follow A Life on Purpose Live as we go through and navigate how to live a purposeful life. It's important to understand these stories that are being told to us by others, but it's also important to understand the narrative and the story that we're telling ourselves. Is the story that you're currently telling yourself leading you to a future of fulfillment? Is the story that you're telling yourself going to lead you to a future of wholeness? And if not, you have the power to change it. You don't need to be improved. All that you need is already within you. Peace.